Mayor, I have Brian here from Plant Moran to give a presentation. This is coming. Got it. We have done this many times in the past. Plant Moran has given us a forecast, and they have done so again this year. And here's Brian to present.
Middle. Good evening. My name is Brian Kingler, partner with Plant Moran. As City Manager mentioned, this is not the first time that we've done this. We were, I think the first time was maybe 5 years ago that we were engaged to do a forecast of the city's general fund and an assessment of where you were at in terms of some fiscal health issues. And then a couple years back, that model or that forecast was revised, and now we've revised it again. So, Clerk, could you put that on screen
right now,
please? Perfect. Thank you very much. So why were we hired? Well, this city, like many others in Michigan and across the country, has had some financial difficulties over the years. Limits to your revenue, expenditures that seem to move and grow faster than any of your revenue sources do. And there was also this pandemic that made a mess of things for a bit, but at the same time, it also created some financial opportunities that many cities did actually benefit from. So we've updated all of the slides from the last time we were here. Some things have changed over the last 2 years. Some things that looked really good 2 years ago don't look quite as good today. Some things that maybe were a little bit frightening a couple years ago will look a little bit better in today's light. So we'll just go through some of your primary revenue sources of your general fund, your primary expenses, and talk about some of the options that you'll have in the future to raise additional revenue. Because the city of Hamtramck doesn't have an expenditure problem as much as it has a revenue problem. And so the options for raising revenue are limited, but they do exist, and it will be up to the city to decide which path it wants to go down. So this is a summary from 2018 through the estimate in 2025. The blue bar representing revenue, the orange bar representing expense. So prior to the pandemic, you were losing money every year, for the most part, 3 out of 4 years in your general fund. But because of some cost containment that happened during the pandemic, as well as some federal funding, you see here in 2022 and 2023, the city had a pretty good surplus. 2024, basically break even, and 2025, hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll be break even. But there are some significant issues that you're going to have to address. One of them is the usage of the Dickerson jail site and the revenue that you used to receive from it. We'll get to that in a couple slides. So these revenue sources that I'm going to go through now, and I will go through them quickly so it's not 3 hours, are presumed stable. So these are fairly reliable year to year. No significant risk associated with these that I would be overly concerned about. Obviously, nothing is perfectly safe, but these are presumed stable. So excluding the GM plant, your property tax revenues across the city should continue to rise. They are limited by the rate of inflation. Last couple of years, that's been pretty good. I'm sorry, limited by the lesser of 5% for inflation. But with the last couple of years of inflation being over 5%, you were able to have the maximum 5% growth. Now, inflation is back down, and even though it would be nice to have the property tax revenue, I think what it does to the expense side of the equation is not what you want to have. But if we continue to be in the 3-ish% range for property taxes, given where you were coming from about 10 years ago, I think that's pretty good. General Motors was one of those things that did rebound. There was a temporary shutdown at the plant, came back online. The assumptions here in the future years are that The plant will continue to be at the current operational level. They could add another shift, certainly. There could be plant expansion, but we're just saying status quo for the time being is a safe assumption. State share revenue. This is one where the bump you see there in 2022 is due primarily because of the changes to the census. The population of Hamtramck grew from 2010 to 2020. And so once the census was calculated and certified as final, you received a good bump in some, call it back pay, of your state shared revenue. Over time, statewide, state share revenue has been going up about 2.5% a year. I just saw this morning the governor's proposed, a very preliminary budget estimate would have 4% increase in the state share revenue. I would be surprised if it ends up being 4%. I think around 2.5 is more likely. But at the same time, there's also been an announcement regarding tentative potential plans for road fixing in the state of Michigan. The plan that I saw today was, there was one coming from the governor's office, one coming from House of Representatives, and that it would take some of the sales tax out of buying gasoline, and in exchange would be an inflated gas tax. For the customer at the pump, they would be held harmless, but your state share revenue comes from sales tax. So if there was a reduction in the sales tax because of that, yes, you'd end up getting more road money, but you would get less state share revenue. The estimate that I saw was statewide, if it were to pass as it was proposed, and granted there are a lot of things that would have to happen before that, but the rough estimate was $95 million across the state that wouldn't go to local units of government for their general funds. District Court has come back, rebounded nicely. The estimate is that would just continue at an inflationary level. City did a really good job, and continues to do a good job, of collecting on income taxes. Prior to 2022, there was probably money left on the table as collection efforts weren't as strong as they are now. And the assumption is that now that you've got it where it's at, it should continue and continue to grow. Now, questionable revenue source. Clearly, the Dickerson facility, we don't know what's going to happen with it. I don't know that anyone knows what's going to happen with it. But what we do know is that you won't be receiving the $1.3, $1.4 million that you were getting every year for the time being. So that puts a dent in your budget. 1.3, 1.4 million is certainly nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of personnel, that's a lot of repairs, et cetera, et cetera. So altogether, primarily because of the lack of funding coming from the Dickerson facility, you see that our forecast here does suggest that 2025 and beyond, the next couple of years, would be less than what you received in 2023 and 2024. Now, as those inflationary increases on the other sources continue to grow, you'll get back to where you were in 24 and continue onward, but it's definitely a step backwards. For the purposes of these graphs, I did exclude the $16 million that you received from the state of Michigan for your pension system. That money didn't flow through City Hall, it went directly to MERS, and if I included it, now we had to record it, it is in your financial statements, but it would skew the graphs, and I thought that it would muddy the waters of the story. So we just pulled that 16 million in and out on the general fund revenues and expenses. So going forward, you're looking at inflationary increases for the most part. Is there additional income tax that could be collected? I don't know, but I definitely think it's worth something to pursue to make sure that you're not leaving any money on the table in the city. Is this enough? And I think the answer, and I think you know the answer as well, is it's probably not. So now let's look at expenditures. So we added a bar to this. So we've got the blue is the actual expenses going back to 2018. Orange, just like for revenue, is the forecast going ahead. But we also included this increase or decrease. So you can see that there has been year to year some fluctuation in these expenses. And if you look into the forecast aspect, we're hoping that those expenses are able to go down. But we know, and you know, that the city has capital needs, and people have to be paid fairly in order to continue working here and not look at other options. And so over the next 5 or 7 years, can you hold it down to $500,000 a year increase in general fund expenses? I don't know, but I think it will be difficult. This is just another way of looking at your expenditures, breaking it out, personnel and everything else. Personnel including wages, fringes, retirement, hospital, insurance, etc. But your personnel makes up by far the most of your budget. I would say most communities, or the most fiscally sound communities, personnel probably 65 to 70% of their budget. Yours is well north of 80. So not that you have too many people, I'm not suggesting that at all, I know that you don't, but what it suggests is that you don't have money for many of the other operational costs throughout the city. This is just breaking down personnel even further, so you can see the wage component, the insurance component, and the pension component separately. The thing that's most striking to me is that we talk a lot about insurance and how much healthcare costs. But in terms of what the city of Hamtramck spends, healthcare is not anywhere near the majority or even an equal expense to wages and pension. Wages and pension are by far the greatest amount. So if there's a conversation about what can we do to bring down healthcare costs, sure, I'm sure that you have options, but just looking at this, you can tell that whatever you do to healthcare really isn't going to move the needle overall for the city. MERS is your pension contribution to MERS is a very large portion of your budget. In 2025, it's estimated to be, by the time you get to June 30, over 30% of general fund money will go to paying for folks that aren't here anymore. The future numbers are coming from your actuarial evaluation, but a lot of that is tied to wages. So as wages go up, the pension contribution goes up as well. So the reality is the MERS contribution is very significant. The retirees compared to your active employees, retirees outweigh the employees 3 to 1. So today's taxpayers are paying for folks that aren't providing service anymore. That's not unusual. Many cities in Metro Detroit are like that. The older the city, the more mature the city. This is a problem in a lot of places, but it's still a problem. Just because a lot of folks have it doesn't mean it's any less of an issue. You'd have previously done a lot to cut healthcare costs, and so there isn't much, if any, meat remaining on that bone. So I don't know that I would spend a lot of time and effort looking at that. I would be talking to MERS, what can we do perhaps to extend out those payments even further and lower the cost year to year. Your non-personnel costs, so if remember a couple slides back, we said it's very small. It's a very small part of your budget. It's already quite lean, your budget is. Only $6 to $7 million a year for everything else other than people. And so any conversation about small items, and I know nickels add up, quarters add up, but the amount of time it takes to save a significant amount of money when you're counting nickels, you don't have that kind of time. You have to find dollars. So whether that is on expenditure decreases, which may or may not be possible, Most likely it's going to be on the revenue side. This is putting everything together, the forecast, revenue, expenses, and fund balance. So you, at one point, years ago, you were in a deficit. You were able to crawl your way out of that. In the late 2010s, you were using up some of your fund balance. And then during the pandemic, as you got the ARPA money and other federal sources, you were on the rise again. Fund balance peaked in 2023. But now, as those that free money from the federal government, while that has now dissipated, your expenses continue to go up, and it's going up faster than your revenues. And so you can see that your fund balance is going to continue to go down unless you are able to right the ship. 2029, 2030, based on those assumptions that we've discussed, you'd end up in a deficit, at which point the state of Michigan would get involved again and require you to have a deficit elimination plan. Some combination of new revenue and less expense to crawl back out of that hole again. Now we've only been talking about operations. So folks at home probably didn't see it, but the folks in the room saw at the beginning of the meeting there was an issue with the microphones. There was a comment about as soon as if we fix something, something else breaks. That happens all over the city. That happens with your vehicles, your roads, your buildings, everything. So there are millions of unfunded needs throughout the city. Roads, police cars, fire trucks, water, infrastructure. Granted, water doesn't come out of the general fund, but just saying, you need a lot more revenue coming into the city in order to take care of all those needs. This is summarizing some of the other activity. So my conclusion and my summary is, you're doing a lot better than you were at previous points in history, but because of the loss of the Dickerson revenue, because your other revenue sources are growing slower than your expenses, you're not in a great position today. And it looks, based on everything that's happening, it does look like that the city's general fund will be in decline as expenses exceed revenues and you use up your fund balance. So you need a revenue source. You need new money coming in. Where might that come from? Well, your options are limited. You're already maxed out on your operating millage. Can't really count on state share revenue to go anywhere. Grants, while helpful, typically do not just give you money. It's to buy something already that you're going to have to buy, and so it doesn't do anything to help pay for people usually, other than COPS grants or safer grants for fire folks, but that's not how you dig your way out. Possibly there's more income tax money out there that you can get. I would certainly be looking to that. And then further economic development within the city, any vacant buildings or vacant parcels, or just rehabbing something that's already there, that would drive up your tax revenue. As far as property tax millage, your only real option is Public Act 345, and I know the city has talked about that for years and has tried several times to get that to pass. Unfortunately, the taxpayers and voters did not see it that way and have rejected that a couple times. But if you're just looking at raising revenue and you want to go big or go home, 345 is the way to do it. That would take care of your pension obligation every year, or could. You'd be able to raise taxes to the necessary level to take care of those expenses, which we saw already was your number 2 expense in the general fund behind wages. So in summary, summing up, you have to bring in more money. You have to figure out a way to do that, squeeze it where you can, maybe take a big swing at 345 millage and really go hard on public education. Do you like having the police presence, the fire protection? Do you like the services that you get? Well, it costs money and we need more. Based on, I know you have something already of a capital improvement plan. But that should be a living document that is being constantly updated, and those capital needs prioritize, reprioritize again as things break, as things become more of a desperate need. You have to put money back into the city, into infrastructure, or else it's going to fall apart. So that's not something you can cut in order to maintain operations. That's what the city did 20 years ago, it's what the city did 10 years ago, and it did not do anything to help the city, really. You're in a much better position than you were last time the state was involved, no question. You had a good string of a few years where you were able to bank or save some of that fund balance, and that's put you in a position that has bought you some time, not a lot of time, but it has bought you some time to work on that new revenue source, or if you want to look at the cost savings, limited as they may be, you do have some time, but not that much. And so it will be up to city administration, city council to decide what path you want to take. But don't wait too long, because if we do this again in a couple of years and you haven't made significant strides, those slides are going to look that much worse. That's it as far as my prepared comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Mr. Chair. So Brian, from your presentation, you're telling me we have a chance to go for the state to take over, correct?
2030.
I wouldn't say take over, I'd say the state might get involved. Since the Flint water crisis, we haven't seen the state want to take over a city. I don't think that's changed, but they can't ignore it when you end up losing fund balance. In fact, when your fund balance goes down 3 years in a row, that trips something at the Michigan Department of Treasury, and they will get involved in some way. They want to participate in helping you stop that.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
last time we brought the state, when we was going to that situation, me and Mr. Jonah sent a letter to Michigan State to come, look over and do some stuff. From your speech, it is very clear, either increase the tax or reduce the cost. Okay? This body have to understand that. That's all I'm gonna say.
Actually, Councilman, he said it's a revenue issue, not a cutting issue. We're very lean, which means there's not much to
He
cut.
just mentioned also, reduce the cost also is the option.
Well, it's two sides of the coin.
That's why you said, which way you go, it's your
But
responsibility.
the bigger problem is the revenue.
Yeah. Revenue we max out already, so we have option, you give them, we have to educate the people. If we send all those things to the board, they're never gonna pass. They did not, so, lot of things.
They may with the right community education.
Okay?
Well, things change. So remember the first year they came and they told us we will be down in 1 to 2 years. But then the next year things went up.
Every 10 years.
So things change, unexpectedly. And then when they came the next time, they showed a very good presentation, and I reminded them what happened last year. They told us we will be down. They said you had some money on, somewhere that you weren't able to collect it previously. So I can see that the jail is the major problem, but it looks like we have a solution for that coming soon. So that would solve the major problem, hopefully. And then we have, continuous development of houses, new businesses. We expect the property tax to go higher in the coming, 2 to 3 years. We have sold so many lots that will be developed soon. That will bring more revenue. The tax keep increasing, especially for the houses that are sold or recently over the last 2 or 3 years. So we have, and then the population continue to grow. I mean, there are some people that keep saying that it decreases. No, the population continues. We expect we know that our population is way more than 30,000 because the last census wasn't accurate. And so hopefully, we see that people are having hard time to find houses for rent or to buy. So we know that there are a lot of people, coming to our city. But we have to think about other, there are some major projects that we keep hearing about, coming to the city. We can't, say for sure that they will happen soon, but I don't think that we will be in a difficult situation soon. It shows that we will be in deficit in 2030 according to the prediction. That's too far to judge. From now, 6 years, I'm sure a lot of things will happen. So I think we are in a good situation, especially with a partial solution to the jail that we expect to happen. We don't want to talk about the details, but hopefully that will keep us in a good position. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, that's good to hear about the Kirchner, someone working under to come and take the place. Any idea about the mechanism?
Yeah, that's one of the major projects. I said we are not sure about what's happening, but we are working on it. We just discussed with the city manager and the attorney last week about something, and then I directed the city manager to contact them because there is some development happening and major investment.
That's what I hear, like, yeah,
Yeah,
before.
so we want to continue working with them to see if it's going to happen soon or not.
Mayor, if I may, there is absolutely no need to hit the panic button at this point, but what Plant Moran is basically saying is we need to be responsible, we need to be mindful, which we always have and always will be. We need to continue to maximize the revenues at any chance we get, which we do constantly. As you stated, there's potential developments on the horizon at any given time. We're always cultivating those. There's buildings always going up. There's always something potentially looming. Things can change rapidly, as you also indicated that we're still working on the Dickerson facility, so I anticipate we're actually having a couple meetings coming up that I haven't even given you guys the dates on that yet, but Mr. Maraway and I plan a meeting here real soon on that. And there's always things going on, so I think we will be fine. In fact, I know we'll be fine, but there will be times where we just need to do the best we can and be mindful. And that doesn't necessarily mean start just cutting randomly things, because the city has to function and there's still expenditures that have to be made. But maybe we don't tap into the fund balance for $1 million in extra alleys this year. Things of those should probably stem for a while, which we have been doing for the past couple of years. We've been kind of a little happy on paving some more than we should, but thankfully we have grants coming for that too. So I don't think those things will stop, but we just need to be mindful of things like that.
Okay, thank you. Well, any more questions?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.